Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Governance and Audit Committee of Tydfil County Borough Council. For the record, it's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 4th of December, and this is a meeting which is both in the council chamber and hybrid online. The usual pleasantries about today's meeting is maybe or is being recorded and will be broadcast on the authority's website. First item on the agenda today is apologies for absence. On the audit team, I'm aware that Helen Harbord's not well, so she is absent. Any other absences? Councillor Dan Roberts. Okay, thank you. And we'll note that accordingly. And Councillor Andrew Barry. There he has just appeared. Hello.
My chair had some trouble getting on, so thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is declaration of interest, and members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the various acts listed on the agenda. Anyone wish to declare any interests relevant today? And of course, it's not just members, it's the lay members as well. Okay, thank you. We'll next go on to the minutes of the previous meeting for information. I hesitate there, of course, because we did have a special meeting last Monday. Those minutes obviously aren't available yet. I think I've seen a draft of them, however. So these minutes are the last but one meeting, which was Monday, the 23rd of October. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Any issues around accuracy? Anyone wants to flag? Okay. And anything that anyone wishes to raise which isn't listed on the action log? Okay, Lisa.
The meeting that was held on the 23rd of October, there was a query about schools insurance and Evolve, so we just wanted to provide an update on a response in that schools are responsible for arranging insurance for their own activities. There's not a corporate held insurance policy in place, and schools are aware of this. So it would be up to the school to determine the costs, the insurance premiums, and this would be dependent on the terms and conditions of the insurance policy, and the accuracy of what's on Evolve is irrelevant.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I think somebody raised that in conversation last meeting, so that's helpful to clarify. One from me, which isn't specifically an action, but just for clarification, minute 377, page 7 of the bundle. The bottom bullet talks about corporate joint committees. I think we had a brief conversation about their governance and audit committees. I've made inquiries since that meeting, and I'm told that there is no governance audit committee yet for the South East Wales corporate joint committee, but one is intended to be recruited for in the new year. So keep an eye on that. But as governance in that area is important, because obviously that the CJC has some significant spends commitments allocated to it. So we'll keep an eye on that as it goes forward. Thank you. Which is a neat segue, I think, onto the next item, which is the action log. I note that the large majority of items are marked as completed. However, the very first one is about risk training to be provided, and this has gone on for a little while. Status continues to say this will be addressed once the head of policy and performance post is filled. I'm perhaps better to save a conversation on this till we get to the item on capability under the rolling program of risk reviews, unless anyone wants to particularly talk about it now. Okay, I'll happy to pick that up when we get to that point then. Okay, thank you. All the others are marked as completed. Anything else from anyone else? Okay. We'll move on to item 5. No, we won't. My apologies. I should have said this at the beginning. And one of the items on the further down the agenda, item 11, is the rolling program corporate risk update on education. And my thanks to Sue Walker for stepping in at very short notice to be here this afternoon. So we've shuffled the agenda a little bit, and we'll pick up item 11 on the agenda next, if that's okay with everyone. Matthew's name is down to introduce the paper, but I'm guessing Sue will probably hand straight to you. How do you want to play this?
But we're doing this at the moment, Chair.
So everyone's pointing at everybody else. Okay, that's helpful.
Okay. I think, yeah, it's just a brief update for me. It's success in learning, as it says in the report, is a key outcome for all learners. There are 4 risks. There are 4 risks on the corporate risk register which could affect the success. Can I just move members to 4.2 for a moment, where there is there are errors. It says that the risks relating to SCL, home to school transport and demand for ALN, were added in 2023. It says community focused schools. That shouldn't be community focused schools. That should be sustainable communities for learning. And then you've got home to school transport, and ALN has increased. Well, actually, home to school transport was increased to 20, but then ALN was taken out and added as an additional risk. So we've got an increase in demand for additional learning needs support and associated transport. When we considered it at CMT, it felt that the home to school transport, which is for mainstream pupils, would be a risk, but we also have an increased risk in our ALN support, and that will bring it with it transport. They are 2 quite separate risks. One is easier to mitigate than the other. The home to school transport is easier to mitigate than the associated, the ALN, because that's more demand led. I think we've got the mitigation against school attainment. We have supported our schools. We haven't got as many accountability measures that we can report against, and that is possibly a concern moving forward as to how we're able to report against the school attainment one, but it is something that all local authorities are looking at. And as you can see, we've put in performance panels for all our secondary schools. We've also put in performance panels for our underperforming primary schools. The Sustainable Communities for Learning, which is the which you may well have known as 21st Century Schools, is, we are seeing increasing costs coming into that aspect, and it is a cause for concern for us with the capital programme where it is. We have secured some additional funding. We do get funding from Welsh Government for it, but it is an area of risk within Welsh Government as well, with the increasing costs in materials. Home to school transport, as members are aware, is subject to the increase in fuel costs and the contracts moving forward. We do have some additional demands, and we are concerned that there may be issues with contractors perhaps going into liquidation, and how we actually manage that how we would manage that moving forward. And then the additional one that we added was the increased demand for ALN support. We are seeing an increased demand for our children with ALN moving forward from our schools, and if they are taken out of their mainstream provision and put into a learning resource base or put into another area, into another school, that is increasing our demand for homeschool transport. So we are putting, looking at mitigation. They are coming to a board to consider the children that are being put into other classes in other schools. We are looking at bursaries for parents, but we've tried that previously and that hasn't worked. Parents prefer actually having transport for their children going to schools. So we are looking to continue to deliver our risk mitigation actions, and we need to sought cabinet approval of the corporate risk register. Happy to take questions from members, Chair.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Questions for Sue? Can I just pick a one? I guess this is not a formal declaration, I don't think, but I'll say it anyway, just be on the safe side. I'm a governor of a school which is currently going through the 21st Century School development, but not in Merthyr, it's in RCT. I also sit on RCT's Education Inclusion Scrutiny Committee. The 21st Century School stuff, of course, is interesting, and I guess the pressures there about budgets, because 21st Century School funding was set at a level before the inflationary levels that have increased. Does this mean we are not able to deliver what we had in mind when we set off in the programme, or is there flex in the budgets to allow us to actually deliver what we envisaged at the beginning?
We're currently looking to actually be able to complete the Blessed Carlo Acutus and the Penetrate and the Goitra programmes that we've got within the within the programme. It's when we're looking further down the line, Chair, to further projects that are coming in. We need, and I already identified further projects that need to come in, although they haven't come to council for approval yet. That is where we're going to have to consider how we take that forward because of the increased demands. And I think in discussions with Welsh Government, they're very much aware that this is an increased pressure for all local authorities.
Yes, we're absolutely not in it alone here. Everyone's in the same boat. But then again, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. I mean, we'll note his declaration effectively then in terms of not being available in well, that we had discussed this. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I was saying that yes, whilst we're not alone in this, everyone's in the same boat. Welsh Government, although has lots of funding pressures, however, and whether they're aware of the pressures is one thing. Whether they provide additional funding is quite another, I suspect. And we might find out some of that on 20th of December, I suspect. Can I ask one other question since you're in the room, in terms of the key risks for it in the education area, and that's about attendance. Obviously, it's been well reported in national media, Welsh national media, about attendance levels being nowhere near the 95% they were pre-pandemic and being somewhere near 80%, I think was the number was quoted. Is that a key risk for us? Are we anywhere different to the rest of Wales in terms of those numbers? And if so, do you think that's a risk worth mentioning? Because you're never going to get attainment if the children don't go to school.
It's on our departmental risk register. Attendance has been for a number of years. When the secondary school figures were published earlier this term, we were 17 out of 22 local authorities, which is better than we were prior to COVID. However, we're not sitting on our laurels by any stretch of the imagination, because we do have significant persistent absentees in both our primary and our secondary schools. So it is a risk for us. And I do agree, Chair, that if the children aren't, definitely the children aren't in school, they're not going to attain. So it is something that we are working very hard on. The Welsh Government decision to make the persistent absentee rate 90% as opposed to 80% will have a detrimental effect on our figures, certainly in our secondary schools. And that's something that I know we are sort of challenging Welsh Government, as if you want to sort of have some positive moves, whilst we agree that 90% is not good enough, that we want to attain, we want to go for 95%, actually making that a reportable figure will cause us and other local authorities quite considerable difficulties in moving forward and showing the progress that we are making. We're doing a considerable amount of work with our community focused schools officers on persistent absenteeism in all our secondary schools, because whilst those that are below the 80%, you may say, well, actually, are you going to get them back into school? We want them back into school, and we actually want them achieving at the best that they possibly can, even if they haven't been in school. So it doesn't sit as a corporate risk register, but it does sit on our departmental risk register.
Thank you. That's helpful to understand where it sits in the hierarchy. Thank you. That's really helpful from my perspective. That's all the kind of question I want to know is all the kind of issues around where we want to be and what we want to do next are kind of interesting. And I guess we'll come back to this, but I suspect the education and scrutiny committee will be all over this as well, I suspect. So I don't want to duplicate their effort. I can see a hand up online. Councillor Scriven, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the incurred cost from the A465, which we get in terms of home to school transport, is there any update yet in terms of where we are with pushing for Welsh Government to cover part of that cost?
Chair, if I may take that. Yeah, so I've written to Andy Filling, who is the lead director for Welsh Government for the project. His officers have come back with further questions. We're just finalising a position. Actually, something we were doing this morning. So the cost estimate in terms of what we've incurred is about £240,000 for the period we deem. There's then a discussion ongoing in terms of when which parts were available in their eyes. So we're trying to narrow down an agreed position in terms of the availability of the routes. when they were or weren't available. You know, we've got a clear view in terms from our perspective, but it's an ongoing discussion. I'm hoping to get this letter off, if not today, tomorrow morning, and have that next step discussion with Welsh Government officials then.
Okay.
And obviously,
Oh,
I'll keep members up to date as we go.
yeah, that'd be great. Obviously, because of the strain, obviously on the budget, this difficult time, it'd be good to be kept in the loop in terms of how that's going. Thanks, Alice.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That's a really helpful conversation. As I said, Sue, this will continue to be discussed elsewhere, I'm sure. So, but really helpful to have this kind of deep dive to understand the issues that underpin that individual risk. Thank you. Yes, you're free to go. We return to the published batting order, and next item on the agenda, therefore, is item 5, which is the annual review and assessment of complaint handling and effectiveness. This is going to be a two-headed person between Simon and Gaynor. Play it any way you want to between the two of you.
Thank you, Chair. The report is actually in my name, and it's a tricky report to prepare in that, as you know, what you're looking at today is what is prescribed by the Local Government Elections Wales Act, which says the Governance and Audit Committee needs to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints effectively. So you don't look at what the complaints are, it's about how we deal with the complaints once we've received those complaints. So as I said, the report is very similar to the report that went up last year, purely because not a lot has changed in the way we handle complaints in the intervening year. In fact, they haven't changed to any significant degree since we updated our complaints policy back in 2021. That's the last major change that we had. Things are still the same. I manage the complaints department. The complaints department is Gaynor, the complaints officer, to my left, and Sarah, who assists Gaynor. We also have assistance from another solicitor in any dealings with the Ombudsman. And we are working with the Ombudsman in relation to updating training as and when that is required. There was training meant to be arranged, I think round about now, actually, Gaynor, but the Ombudsman had to cancel that, but that would be rearranged in the new year. So things are pretty much the same. What has changed, however, and you'll see from the report, complaints are up. And again, I would say that is not a reflection upon the complaints department. I think it would say that people are aware of how to complain. They are aware that they can complain, and people are becoming perhaps more familiar with that kind of process. As you'll see from the report, you can access the complaints procedure and complaints forms via the internet site. It's on the front page of the site. It takes you to an easy accessed set of policies and procedures. They're all there: social services complaints, corporate complaints, education complaints. And looking specifically at some of the figures we've got here, you'll see there's been a marked increase, and that's probably the most obvious thing, in adult social services complaints. They went up significantly this year to 56 from about 33, I think, the year before. So although we've had an increase in complaints about adult social services, the positive is only one of those complaints wasn't resolved at stage 1, i.e. within the department. Only one went to stage 2. And even more positive than that is in relation to children's social services complaints. Although they were, I think, up slightly, none of those went to stage 2. So every single complaint we received about children's social services was resolved within the department. Corporate complaints, they are regularly going up. You've seen the figures that are in the report. They're going up every single year. This year they've gone up from 499 to 533. 19 of those weren't resolved to the satisfaction of the complainer, and they went to stage 2. We got to remember, stage 2 for a corporate complaint isn't the same as stage 2 for a social services complaint. For a corporate complaint at stage 2, it's still dealt with within the council, with more senior officers looking at that complaint. And again, I would say as a positive, I've calculated you briefly before this report was called, that we had 678 complaints in total this year, up from 611 last year. So 67 additional complaints. Only 17 weren't resolved to the satisfaction of the complainer, because only 17 was referred to the Ombudsman. And on the last page of the report, I think I've set out the last 3 years of Ombudsman referrals. And this year, I said the number is 17 going there. That's less than last year. Even though we had fewer complaints last year, we had more dissatisfied with our the way we dealt with them. 27 went up last year, 15 the year before. So if you look at the percentages that have been sent to the Ombudsman, 2.5% of all complaints, which I think shows that we are able to handle complaints within the council. We are able to deal with them effectively, and it is not, even though they're going up, we are not finding the additional complaint work such that we need to change the way the department is handled. I would say that I mean, yes, you can drill into the figures that we got in the complaint reports, and you can see where problems are arising, and maybe obviously that's something for the departments themselves to consider. But I'd say not for the complaints department. You know, I mean, both Gaynor, myself, and Sarah, and Gavin, the other solicitor who's dealing with these things, we've been in post a long time now. We understand the complaint process. We understand the procedures and the policies. So I think we're quite a tight ship. I would say that because I'm talking about myself. But Chair, I'm not sure. I mean, if I can add anything over and above that. If you've got any questions, obviously I've got Gaynor here who can perhaps drill into some of the figures better than I can. As I said, all I do is manage the department and sort of deal with any issues that Gaynor finds taxing. Sometimes, you know, a little bit of legal guidance is helpful. Chair, those are my points.
Thank you. That's really helpful introduction.
Thank you.
I guess one thing that's probably worth saying is that an increase in complaints isn't of itself necessarily a bad thing. It means that people feel able to raise complaints, and hopefully that means that they feel that their complaints will be heard. Well, they don't bother because no one ever does anything around here kind of mentality. So in a way, that's good news. People don't just complain on social media; they actually raise things and they get addressed. My issue, and I guess this committee's issue, really is around learning lessons and making sure we fix things. You know, it's to put things right in terms of the general issues rather than the specific issues. Are there any sort of generic learning points that come from any particular areas where we have significant numbers of complaints? I think bins gets mentioned quite a lot. Is there any learning we can take for that, and what does the feedback loop look like? Because the complaints come to you guys who deal with them, but I presume you engage the rest of management in terms of responses and acting upon the complaints that come in. Is that a fair characterization?
I mean, we have got a section on both reports, social services and corporate, with lessons learned. We do pick up on, you know, there are examples where something has been implemented into the department in order to, especially those complaints that are upheld, where we can, you know, we can learn from it's cliche comment, lessons learned, but it is the positive from the complaints being submitted, and this is why we welcome the complaints, because it gives us opportunity to put something right.
And hopefully to ensure it doesn't happen again.
Mm.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
that's really helpful. Thank you, Gaynor. Online hand up, Councillor Scriven.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just had two quick questions. The first one, I know we're looking at the trend date and it does look like it's gone up slightly. No, since we moved the complaints form to the banner, the website, do you think that's had any impact on the amount of complaints you've received?
I'm not sure. I think this was raised last year, Councillor Scriven, and I think it's in the same place as it was last year. I think you mentioned the fact that it wasn't top of the list on the front page, but it's still on the front page. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the sense in putting it as our main banner as we come on to the Merthyr Council website, instead of complaining about us. But I think it is easy to see. It's easy to access, and I think people can complain if they want to, and people aren't shy in coming forward these days to complain.
Yeah, it's good to know that it hasn't been overused in varying capacities. I think that was the good thing. At least it's there and it's not causing a problem on our end as well. The other thing was in terms of, there's a note down about the increase in staff complaints. So, no, in terms of staff complaints, are these when they reported internal or external, or is it like a mix of both?
This would be, sorry. This would be external, so it's where a member of the public have complained about a staff member, whether it's a crew on the refuse or somebody that they've been in contact with. Social services will usually be about the social worker, unfortunately, but that's what that's what the staff. But it wouldn't be internal; he said external.
If I can add as well, there will be a couple of complaints in there about the complaints department. Because very often the messenger becomes part of the complaint itself, and people aren't satisfied with the result they get or the way they feel they're treated. And invariably, in fact, in the last 2 weeks, we've had a complaint in. One, it's the same complainant about Gainer's responses to him and mine. So, I think that's part and parcel of being a complaints officer, that you will often get the blunt end of somebody's dissatisfaction with the council. It becomes a dissatisfaction with the person who you're responding to. So yeah, there are 1 or 2 in there about the complaints department as well, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scriven. Last one for me. There's the table of just on page 7 of the report itself onwards, which characterises all the stage 1 by broad area of breakdown. You can, and as I think it's mentioned that areas that are have the biggest numbers around council tax, around recycling, around refuse, etc. I kind of wonder whether is there a way to characterise them in terms of the kind of seriousness of the authority about. If somebody's bin wasn't collected, then it's an issue. Of course, it's an issue. But are there significant concerns that affect people's health, welfare, finances? I'm thinking, for example, about housing, whether it's could be damp and mold, for example, those kind of areas. So clearly, some of these complaints are more not going to characterize any of them as frivolous, but some are clearly more serious than others. Could you sort of pick out anecdotally, perhaps, some of the more serious ones and how we fix them?
I think if we used housing for an example, most of the complaints that are with housing are usually challenging the ban that they've been put in. They're not usually about the condition of the house. When it comes to refuse collection, I wouldn't usually get involved with my bin hasn't been collected this week. It's usually if it's been, a continual problem. So that's sometimes something we would look at further, whether or not, they're not putting it out properly or they're not putting it out on time. I think the important part to look at, instead of looking at the number of the complaints, is how many then are upheld. So whether those are the ones that we have actually, have had to go and resolve. I think if we're looking at corporate or social services, I think if we look at social services, the seriousness of them and the reason I think that they don't get it sort of escalated to stage 2 is because we hold meetings with the complainant and with the manager. And I think that's been helping us then. Those are, quite serious level as well. And those are the ones that we meet and hopefully are able to resolve. And it has worked because they haven't been progressed to stage 2. Which they have a right to do.
And I presume those are the ones that take up the majority of time.
They take up, the majority of time. Sometimes we will find perhaps 10% of our complainants can take up about 90% of our time because of the complexity of them as well.
Excellent, thank you. That's a really helpful conversation. Any last questions? Sorry.
I think's working.
Weave instead then, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask about vexatious complaints that have been through the ombudsman and people still keep complaining. Do you have many difficulties these days?
Yes.
Oh.
No, we have one that's subject to vexatious. Vexatious is something that we take a lot of time to get to that point because of the restrictions that it puts on that person. So we've only got one, which means that they can't telephone in unless it's not that of an emergency. However, in the last year, we have had to restrict communication. I'd say more in the last year than in the number of years I've been in complaints before then. And unfortunately, that's not just down to the volume of complaints that have come in, but it's also the behaviour of the complainant as well. So legal have been very helpful with this, in order for us to sort of not just protect the complaints department, but it's about protecting staff as well, to the point that we've had to put signs up now in all public areas, which we didn't have, you know, a year ago.
It's probably worth noting as well that it's only for a defined period. So, and then I have to review it after a 6-month period, and it is 6 months, isn't it? And then, you know, if behaviour continues, obviously we leave the vexatious position in place.
Oh, thanks.
So what I would say is that, I mean, being vexatious is completely different. As Gaynor said, we've only got one person on vexatious. I mean, we normally use vexatious where somebody has put forward a complaint, they've not accepted that decision, and they keep raising the same complaint.
Okay.
A lot of people who are in that kind of category will very often bring in small elements that they haven't previously brought up, and you can't make them vexatious because you got to be very careful to sort of consider every aspect of the complaint. But what we are getting is people who are aggressive, abusive, threatening and disruptive in the civic centre, and they won't be vexatious, they will be banned, and they get letters from the council putting on notice that they're either not to attend, or if they are to attend, is that there's an expectation upon them. But as Ellis just said, you know, you just can't ban somebody for life. You ban them for a set period of time, and then you say we'll review it after. So I think that's what we're finding, that, and it's not just the complaints department. It is the officers in the one-stop shop. They are feeling it significantly. A lot of people now are videotaping their attendances at the civic centre, and it's difficult to deal with somebody when they put a camera in your face.
Oh, right.
People clam up. People are less likely to engage. My view is that it's a private area. Even though it's open to the public, the council have the ability to exclude people. It's the council's building, and if we want to put conditions on somebody's attendance, we can. But that's for another day. That's not about how we handle complaints. That's how we handle customers generally. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a helpful conversation. So the recommendations in the paper are that, and in paragraph 2, that the contents of the report and the appendices be noted and reviewed. I think we've done that. And 2.2 says this committee refer the report and comments of the committee to Cabinet for their consideration. So that's the next step in the process. Okay. Thank you for that. You're released as well, I guess. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda, the next couple of items on the agenda are Audit Wales. We have 2 reports from Audit Wales today. Item 6 is the setting of well-being objectives. It says to consider the report of the Chief Executive, but I guess I'd probably best to throw it over to Audit Wales to talk about it. Unless, Alice, you want to say anything by way of introduction?
No, Chair, happy to defer.
Okay. Oh, I'll hand over to Audit Wales colleagues online.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so we've got duty to carry out examinations once every 5 years of whether a public body that's subject to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, such as the Council, has acted in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle when setting its wellbeing objectives. As you all know, the Council published its latest wellbeing objectives in April 2023 in its latest corporate plan, so it was timely to carry out this review. So we focused on the process the Council undertook in setting its wellbeing objectives and considered how the Council had applied the 5 ways of working as part of that process. So there were various positives in the process the Council undertook, and we found that the Council had applied the Sustainable Development Principle in the process of setting them. It developed its new wellbeing objectives based on a good understanding of current need, the long-term challenges facing the area, risks and opportunities. It drew on a range of data sources to inform this understanding. A lot of hard work went into involving, in particular, the residents of the county borough. So there was a 2-stage consultation process and an excellent response rate to that consultation process overall. There were further positives in how the Council considered the national wellbeing goals under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the extent to which its new objectives cut across the different directorates. We also found that there was scope for the council to strengthen its arrangements to support effective delivery and monitoring of its corporate plan. So we made 5 recommendations to the council. First, we felt that the council, when either reviewing or setting future objectives, should make more explicit links between its corporate plan and other existing long-term plans. So, for example, the economic vision that goes up to 2035, and to more clearly describe how the council will work with partners to help deliver its own objectives and shared objectives, and to build on that successful engagement, to be in a position to assure itself that the responses to such engagement reflect the diversity of the population. Second, we found that the council had not yet aligned its MTFP to its new wellbeing objectives, and considering the resources it will need to deliver them, and to consider the risks to the delivery, that process needed to be done. The third recommendation is about the need to align strategies and service business plans to the new objectives. And then the fourth and fifth recommendations are about monitoring progress of delivering the new wellbeing objectives, both determining how it will monitor the progress and then developing measures to enable it to monitor progress over short, medium and long term, and that reflect the cross-cutting nature of the objectives. We had an organisational response form back from the council, which sets out how the council proposes to respond to the recommendations. We've gone back to the council in a couple of areas on that, just for a bit of further clarity, and that remains outstanding. But overall, we do think the council is actively considering our findings and preparing to respond to them. The organisational response forms are something that we're encouraging all councils to take completed to Governance and Audit Committee. We feel it helps give members assurance then the matters are being progressed. So that's just a brief summary of the report, but I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. And you head off at the past. One of my questions was about implementation, and I guess that'll come to a future Governance Audit Committee to see that implementation plan. I don't know whether somebody can tell us what the likely timescale of seeing that is.
Yeah, so I'd have to come back to you with the dates, but one thing we've been discussing is taking the new ORFs into our AAP process and making sure that obviously that comes before Governance and Audit Committee then. So I'll come back to you with this specific when this report will be coming back to Governance and Audit Committee.
Thank you, Alice. I will just make sure that that sits on the forward work plan of this committee. Ian, if I may, the paragraph that always, the type of paragraph that always perplexes me is the what we founds bit, which is page 6 of your report, page 72 of the bundle, which is the A but B thing, which says the council has applied sustainable development principle, but there is scope to strengthen. I guess everyone, you could say, there's scope to strengthen. So I wonder if you could just give us some, characterize where Merthyr sits across the 22. I don't know if you've published all 22 reports yet, and if so, kind of where would we sit in the pecking order? I'm not expecting an exact number, but roughly.
Well, no, we haven't done all 22. There are a few that are due to be done shortly. I think it is particular to the circumstances of what the council did to set its wellbeing objectives. So that there isn't so much a pecking order, but there was a lot of strength, as I said, of how the council went about setting them, and how it thought about the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I think the fact there's 5 recommendations, most of that relates to monitoring and alignment of things like the MTFP as opposed to the process. So I think there was a lot of positives to be taken out of the process. It was clearly well thought out. It was planned and steps were taken to act in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principles. So if I can't give you a pecking order, but I can say that there were a lot of positives, and the council, really demonstrated a lot of the things we were looking for in the process of setting them. Thank you,
Ian. That's really helpful to understand. Alice, do you want to come back in?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just to mention that, obviously, going through the pandemic, one thing we wanted to do, actually going through it and reflecting as we came out the other side, is from a leadership perspective, both corporate management team and working with cabinet, is that we needed, from a council perspective, to respond to the needs of the public. in terms of what, the health inequalities led by the economic inequalities of the area. And so we tried to set out strategically in terms of those wellbeing objectives to respond to that. Obviously we mentioned about the 15-year economic vision. We reflected, it's always useful holding the mirror up and saying what else you can do. And in terms of further work we're currently doing, we're looking to do an exercise on a 30-year vision for Merthyr, which builds on that 15-year economic vision as well. So, we always try to take positives out of, any challenge back and say what's our feedback loop on what we do next step. Similarly to the, Ian's going to come on to the performance report as well. We already know we're in the process of evolving our performance framework within the authority. So every step of the way is try to, our Deming cycle improvement journey is always plan, do, check, act. What can we do differently? Can we build on it?
That's really helpful to understand, and you're right. We should take any report that comes in as a positive light, as an opportunity to sort of learn from and reflect upon. So, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Ian. Thank you for that, Ellis. Again, the recommendations in Para 2 is something that we note the report, so we do so note. But I suspect, Ian, we stay with you for. And Ellis has neatly mentioned about performance. So the next report is indeed use of performance information.
Yeah, I'll actually be handing to my colleague Rachel on this one. Thanks.
Okay, welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Rachel Harries. I'm a senior auditor with Audit Wales, and I was involved in the work that's led to this particular report. So for a bit of context for you members, this was a piece of work that we did at all 22 councils. We do intend also to publish a national report that will bring together some of the common themes. The report that's in front of you today has been finalised and agreed with the council, and the council has completed an organisational response form which sets out the council's response to our recommendations and how what it plans to do to address them. And although that isn't part of the papers in front of you today, we have received that. We are satisfied with the council's response to the recommendations. Now, as you know, members, part of GAC's role is to assure itself that the council's addressing our recommendations. So, no doubt members would be keen to hear from officers about that. But before that, I'll provide you with a brief overview of the report. And I think before we get into the findings, it's probably useful for us all if I give you a quick overview of the scope of the work and why we felt it was an important area for us to look at. Obviously providing services is a key role for the council. So having information that helps senior leaders understand the perspective of people who use those services and the outcomes, or if you like, impact of those services, that's really important in terms of helping the council understand whether the work is helping the council achieve the objectives that it set itself. So having performance information about outcomes and the service user perspective isn't a new idea. It's a really key part of value for money arrangements. And just in very simple terms, if the council doesn't have that information, how are you going to know if you're doing the things right or even doing the right things? So that's why it was important for us to look at that work. In terms of the scope, it is very specific. So it is worth setting out, I think, what we didn't look at. So just for a point of clarity, this isn't a review of your consultation or engagement activity. It's not about how the council consults with service users on, for example, specific service changes or draft policies or strategies. It's about the performance information the council uses to help it understand the views of service users about what's happening now, current services. And although the review is looking at an aspect of the council's performance management arrangement, it is important to note as well, it isn't a review of the council's performance management arrangements in general, nor it is a review of the quality of the performance data. We haven't looked in detail at either of those things. So in terms of the findings, we were looking to answer the question, and then the report sets it out as well. Does the council's performance data enable senior leaders to understand the service user's perspective and the outcomes of its activities to effectively manage its performance? Now, our overall finding was that performance information provided to senior leaders does not generally enable them to understand the perspective of service users and the outcomes of the council's activities, which then restricts the council's ability to understand the impact of its services and policies. Let's unpack that a bit so you can hopefully see how we've come to that conclusion. So the first section of the report is specifically about the service user perspective. And we found that the performance information provided to senior leaders includes limited information to enable them to understand the perspective of service users. So the council self-assessment does include information like a survey of residents, which does reflect to a certain extent the service user perspective and satisfaction levels with certain council services. The council also reports, as you've heard today, on complaints and compliments, which does give some insight into the experiences of people using council services. But what we didn't see was data being reported beyond those two things. And we also found that what data was being collected was not necessarily being reported regularly to senior leaders. So the second section of the report was specifically about outcomes. And what we found there is that the performance information that's regularly provided to senior leaders largely focuses on outputs and activities rather than evaluating their impact. And what we mean by that is that the data being reported was, in the main, the majority, about how many, how often. It's essentially was a numerical, which will tell you about how busy the council is, but not really whether that activity has been having the intended impact. The third section is about the accuracy of the data relating to the service user perspective and outcomes. We found that the council doesn't have arrangements to ensure that the performance information reflecting the service user perspective and outcomes information is accurate. So while services have a responsibility to check the accuracy of their own data, we didn't find any evidence of any additional checks and balances. So going back to what we said earlier about scope, we're not saying that your data isn't accurate. We're saying that in relation to the service user perspective and outcomes, the council doesn't have arrangements in place to assure itself that the data is accurate. And I'm happy to, clarify that further if we need to. The fourth section, quite brief, is about how the council uses the data it collects. Inevitably, as we concluded that the information provided on outcomes and the perspective of service users is limited. So inevitably, really, the extent to which the council is going to be able to use that information is also limited. And then the fifth and last section is about reviewing and learning. We concluded that the council is reviewing its performance management arrangements, as you've already heard, and that really provides an opportunity for the council to strengthen this information in the specific areas that we've been looking at, so, service user perspective and outcomes. We do also note in that section that it'll be important for the council to compare its approach to service user perspective and outcomes with the approaches of other organisations. That's a point that we've made to most councils. And that takes us then to the recommendations, which are, as set out in the report in front of you. We've got a recommendation about strengthening the information that the council provides to senior users about the service user's perspective. We've got a recommendation about strengthening the information the council provides senior leaders about outcomes. And we've also got an a recommendation that the council needs to assure itself that it has robust arrangements to check the quality and the accuracy of the information that is providing to senior leaders. So that's a brief overview of the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair, about the content.
Thank you, Rachel. That's a very thorough run through of the paper. Interesting to note that whilst there's only 3 recommendations compared to the last one of 5, the overall tone of this report is very different, I think, in terms of sort of some significant gaps, I guess. Welcome the fact that, again, management, the officers have written to you accepting the reports, and I guess an implementation plan, again, will come to this committee in due course. So Ellis, same kind of questions really about timescales for that stuff, and if you have anything specific you want to say in response to this report.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. So I agree with you. The mirror on this one isn't as pretty, I think. It didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. and we fully agree with the conclusions of Audit Wales in respect of this. However, there is some significant work going on with regards to a revamping our performance management framework. So the members in the room will be aware that we've taken a 3-tier approach to looking at not only performance but delivery within the organisation as well. So trying to structure corporate, service and individual, and we wanted to take a parallel approach then to revamping the corporate performance regime against those 3 levels. So again, very much a corporate level, a departmental performance and then individual performance levels, and that then allows us to actually take a golden thread from the every individual member staff right up throughout the organisation to the corporate wellbeing plan and objectives. So that work is underway. More than happy to bring, obviously I would welcome bringing that back at relevant junctures to Governance and Audit Committee for input and review anyway. But there's some significant work going on with that, and we are making headway. But it is a work in progress. So a couple of things that Rachel mentioned as well. Obviously, our data quality and robustness and regime around data isn't where we want it to be. And that hopefully will be teased out not only with the revamp of the corporate performance framework, but also in actually tackling a data strategy for the authority in terms of the quality assurance regime against data needs to be built in each service level. In terms of understanding data in relation to customer voice, so one thing we are currently doing is looking at when in line with budget setting, actually we've got an exercise next week with corporate management team where we are trying to understand against the corporate wellbeing objectives, what are the core KPIs against each of those objectives, and equally then what's the customer voice KPIs, what services do the public most care about, and that will then give us a lens and a context in terms of going into budget setting. So we're trying to layer and build in terms of our maturity with regards to performance within the organisation. But certainly, again, this is a very useful report when we are actively trying to rebuild our performance framework. So that's probably it, Chair. I don't know what I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thanks. It's interesting how a lot of these items today all kind of weave one into the other, don't they? So that's really helpful. Thank you, Alice. Andrew, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The other thing as well, we've been working with our scrutiny committee throughout the process. I think I discussed this in a meeting with Ian recently as well, in the fact that we're using the scrutiny committee as a challenge throughout the process, so all the way from design through to the end, in a similar way we did the wellbeing objectives, but obviously would welcome bringing it back here as part of the action plan as well, Chair.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And online, I've got Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's always useful to have a report sort of highlight and shine a spotlight on something we're heavily involved in. And it is an area that we continually review. But it's a question for Rachel, really, in terms of you indicated the survey is wider, and is there anywhere where you'd consider best practice where we could perhaps take a look to see what practices they've implemented that we could learn from?
Well, thank you, Councillor. I think where there is good practice, our national report will hopefully be able to bring that out. So I would encourage you all to keep your eyes open for that one in the coming months. And I think that probably ties us into the last section of the report as well, where we would really encourage the council to look at what other people are doing, because there will be I think there's no one council that we can point to and go to tell you all just do what they're doing and you'll be fine. Unfortunately, it isn't as simple as that. Would that it was, that would make my job a lot easier. But we would we as part of the last part of that report, we are, as I say, encouraging councils speak to each other, see what people are doing, because there will be things that you can, not necessarily take wholesale, but there will be elements of things that you will be able to learn from each other. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Rachel.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
I'll note the time frame was next few months, so we will indeed keep an eye on
Oh.
that. We'll all subscribe to your newsletter, and we'll make sure we get first dibs of when that comes out. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any more hands up. So, sorry, the system here is there we are. You popped up eventually. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's maybe kind of off topic or something, but it's just in regards to something that Rachel mentioned. And as a way of ensuring the data being recorded is accurate, do we undertake like anything like mystery shopper, phone calls or emails, you know, to raise a complaint, a fictitious complaint, just to see how it's progressed down along the line?
Chair, if I answer that, yes, Councillor Stammer. So there's different regimes per area, so we haven't got a corporate mystery shopper approach. That's something we have discussed before. We've done various exercises of mystery shopper from a customer service perspective, but then again, you've got some areas where I've got quality assurance in the department built in. So, for example, social care has got that, benefits has got that. So, you know, we haven't got. There's not one. It's not one size fits all, I suppose, but it's trying to understand in that performance regime, well, how do we get that quality answer throughout all services to make sure that there is a corporate line on it.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Thank you, Alice. Recommendation here is simply that we note the report, and again, it's something we'll add onto our forward work programme to consider the implementation plan when that comes around to us in due course, I'm sure. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 8, the 120 something page document, which is the draft self-assessment report. Councillor Barry, do you want to give us a general introduction to this one before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the second iteration of our corporate self-assessment report, which replaces our annual performance report. In doing so, it meets the legislation set out under the Local Government and Election Wales Act. It also meets our duties under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. The report relates to 22-23, and at that point, Chair, if I hand over to Ellis, who will provide a brief overview of the report. That's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. So this report is split into sections where we consider corporate centre services as well as how we are delivering against our wellbeing objectives. As this report refers to 22-23, it concerns our previous wellbeing objectives that sat under our corporate wellbeing plan last year, obviously. You'll recall we set our new wellbeing objectives earlier in the year. So just to flag, I need to point out there is an error in the environmental wellbeing section on page 156 of the report. The figures relating to waste are incorrect, unfortunately, and we are still awaiting verification from Welsh Government as to what these figures currently are. At the end of the report, the corporate management team carried out an analysis and evaluation of how well we're working relating to effective, efficient and economic service delivery. And you can see that starting on page 173. And this also includes what we have learned from feedback through the WLJ regarding the first iteration. As I've said previously, this whole ethos is how we evolve in terms of our performance and delivery of services. So some examples include providing more summaries and evaluations in respect to service delivery. We will endeavour to further improve going forward. We also reviewed our action plan, which is being built into our existing plans. And I just bring the committee's attention to the recommendation in 2.1 of the report and ask that you consider this report for us to progress it to council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. It's quite a tome, but I guess a lot of it is prescribed in terms of the layout and etc. Anything we do which improves its kind of readability and flow will be helpful. Or the infographics on it do actually help the reader quite a lot. A couple of quick things for me, and I'll throw it open for others. Paragraph 5.2 of the covering paper has a typo because it says this report considers 21-22, and of course it is 22-23 as you mentioned. Turn the page to 5.2.3. The bottom set of bullets refers to Regional Partnership Board, And nowhere in this document is the corporate joint committee mentioned. And I thought, does the one not replace the other? Or if they do both currently exist, then the CJC doesn't get a mention at all in here. And I don't know if it should.
In reference to CJC replacing the CCR, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so currently that's obviously, it's not live yet due to the delay. But well, actually it is live. It is just going live now. So yeah, so
Okay.
we well noted.
Okay, and the other thing to note is we're currently in first week of December, and this report obviously is the period up to the end of March. Is the intention for these things to be more timely going forward, or failing that, bring quarterly, half-yearly reports so we can look at them rather than just being a backwards piece of work, not backward, looking back piece of work rather than sort of something which can actually inform planning going forward?
In essence, Chair, yes. I totally agree. There was some kind of issue this year around capacity, and like we say with the waste data, it does mean that some of our data is verified quite late into the following year. However, that does not distract from the fact that I think if we consider this report in its rawest sense, it should be a continual perhaps glance at our existing process. I think it was raised in the audit report, which we had another last item as well, in terms of strengthening some of our governance and our processes around our performance. So I think in tandem, and as you alluded to earlier, Chair, all of the items today tend to interweave really. So I think once we strengthen our governance around that item and that recommendation from Audit Wales, it'll lend itself to be able to report better. Something that we have set out in the work that we've been looking at over the last 12 months is the regularity, so perhaps quarterly reporting and perhaps information reports then through to members or through to our scrutiny to strengthen that data and that use of data. Myself and Councillor Barry have also discussed this on how most efficiently we can do that. At the minute, some of the processes are a little bit clunky and they rely on manual input of data. So I think as we mature going forward and we look at our digital solutions as well, that will naturally occur. But I think you are entirely right to say that. And I think, just to give assurance to the Governance and Audit Committee, it's not that this is the only time we've looked at the data contained within the report. I know at departmental level and through to CMT, we do look at these items throughout the year in as accurate a way as we can based on the data we have.
That's really helpful. Thank you. The risk is we could spend the next 17 hours going through line by line on this. So I don't particularly want to do that. I just want to draw out a couple of things. But I tell you what, I'll wait for Councillor Barry to make his point first.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. It's just to concur what Andrew's saying there. I completely sign up to what you said earlier, Chair. It's a retrospective report, and it is a report, and what we need it to be is a tool. And what digitalization will allow us to do is to use it as a tool. So that's the direction of travel. That's our aspiration. Just to give sort of committee some assurance that we want this to morph into something that can be far more useful on a sort of day-to-day basis rather than us, debating it in retrospect.
Yeah, very, very fair point. Thank you, Councillor Barry, and I fully agree with that. Just a couple of specifics, just to sort of flag through. So I'm just go through the paper itself, the report itself, page 26 of 121 or page 133 of the bundle, whichever we are keeping score. There's a piece in there about telephone calls, and it says the council received 98,500 phone calls and answered 94% of answered 94% of these. So that's not within X rings, but answered them at all. So that means, I reckon by my math, that there's over 5,500 calls were not answered at all during the year, and that's something like 20 odd a day. Again, it'd be interesting to get some comparators there in terms of stats. Is this just calls to reception? Is this every single phone call at the organisation? There's lots of mystery under that, but I'm nervous because 5% of a very big number is still a big number, isn't it? So that's just one point. I could do a little bit of context around it in terms of drafting for next time around, I think. I don't particularly need an answer for that now, but it's just kind of help to understand the sort of detail. More specifically, page 34 of the report, page 141 of the bundle. We're in the section which is talking about, again, children attendance, and Sue Walker talked about some of these earlier. But there are some concerning numbers in here, particularly around that table at the top of page 30. The table is page 34. There's some targets here which appear to be wildly optimistic, if truth be told. Percentage of persistent absences the year before was 9.7. We target for 2.5 and missed it by country mile at 7.7. The one directly below, persistent absence in secondary schools, 24% percent of absence the year before. Target of 4.5, and again missed it by a country mile at 24%. There's some good examples of really being way off beam. And there's one at least on here which says data not available, or they're waiting data validation. Again, given that we are in December, this is end of March data, even if it's end of school year, so it'll still be end of July data, it's still 4 months of the data. I'm surprised we haven't got all the data to go in the table before it goes to council. So there's a couple of queries on that page, and again, I don't know if anyone's going to answer them here today. It's not fair to talk about specifics in here. Okay, go ahead, Andrew. Yeah.
Raise my head above the parapet, I guess. No, I obviously can't speak on the data itself. I think it would be more beneficial for Sue to speak on that. But what I will say, Chair, is that that's something that we have picked up on over the duration of the last corporate plan. It was about best use of time and effort for this report. Challenge around target setting is something we've looked at as part of the new corporate plan going forward.
Yeah.
And I think you've picked on best start to life in this example, but there are other examples across the report where either targets are not set or they're not as smart or particularly realistic as one would want. So that is something we look into strengthen in the second corporate wellbeing report that we've approved. And again, Chair, we're happy to bring that back to Governance and Audit Committee, but it will go as part of our continued scrutiny through a formal scrutiny process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Of course, I don't expect people to have the individual data to fingertips now. I just tick on to page 41, where we're talking about employment and economy, page 148 of the bundle. There are targets on there, and I understand entirely why. These are a kind of question data validation, really, and just sense checking. So if I look at the second line down on that table, is in blue. Percentage of working age population who were qualified to level 2. In 2021, it was 58%. And then magically, in a single year, it went up by 18 percentage points. So 18% of the population in a single year gained an NVQ level 2 qualification. I don't believe that, frankly. And the percentage of people with no qualification at all went from 20% to 14% in a single year. And frankly, I don't believe that either, because that's thousands of people. It's just not possible, is it? So there's a few things now about data validation. Again, I don't expect anyone to know the answers to that. But in terms of just tidying up before we get to cabinet, that'll be helpful to understand. Sure, Andrew.
Again, I don't want to give misinformation now, but I believe there was an introduction of funding, which led to more staffing and more available courses. But I would need to clarify that, Chair, before being put on record saying that. But I think that was the reason at that point in time. But I can check that for you and perhaps pick it up offline.
Yeah, because potentially it means literally thousands of people, between even 10,000 people, perhaps. What's the population set of Merthyr working age population? 30,000 people. It's a lot. Anyway, these are very, very big numbers. Okay, that's helpful to understand. I won't go on, but just to say, as long as people have validated and sense checked it, then that's helpful for me. That's the detail. We could spend an awful long time going through this, but I'm assured, Andrew, that the individual scrutiny committees are seeing the relevant bits of this thing before it's stitched together as a whole. One question I did ask, I don't think Alice specifically answered, is we do this as an annual exercise, but we don't put this document together at any point during the year. We just do the individual sections of it, and they go to scrutiny committees. Is that how the performance management happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In essence, what happens is part of our self-evaluation process split into 3 particular areas, and one of those is around data. So it follows the ESTIN framework, the the self-evaluation itself. So throughout the year, or in one workshop and one meeting, that is picked up through a scrutiny process. Alice.
Chair, was just coming. So that's part of something we're hoping to address in terms of this redesign. So if we get our redesign right, the various performance management conversations we have throughout the year on a quarterly, on a minimum of a quarterly basis, will write the self-assessment.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what we're hoping to do.
And of course, we don't want to trample all over scrutiny committees, and there's no need to have duplication effort. Just to be assured that that is happening. That's what we want.
But I mean, obviously, the relevant data will be put in front of scrutiny as well to answer their questions. So we're hoping by one suite of exercises to actually get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. That's really helpful. Sorry, I've ignored you, Councillor Scriven. Your hand's been up for a while.
Thank you, Chair. It hasn't actually been up that long. You're okay. But sorry, I just wanted to ask one question. It's, I have to find the page number. 1 second, what page are on? It's page 132. And it's linking back to what we were talking about complaints. Now, obviously, we were just talking about the nature of some of the complaints that come in. Obviously, Simon was going into and describing how sometimes it's about how the complaint officers themselves. But in terms of the evidence that we've got on here, when we're looking at from 2020 to 2023 in terms of what complaints we receive, and complaint handling is 0 for each year. I don't know whether anyone can expand on that a bit and explain, because we've literally just heard off Simon in terms of how some of the complaints come in, but the figures here are 0.
We'll have to chase that up with the lawyers.
Andrew? Andrew.
Okay, good observation, Councillor Scriven. The level of data that you see in the report is the table that's in the report that Simon and Gaynor presented in terms of what we report to the Ombudsman. I think there is a piece of work that needs to be done on clarifying what each of those categories are, because they tend to be too high level, I think, based on the nature of this report. And it's something we've spoke about again earlier in the meeting, was around making the data more real. At the minute, I think we're in a very early stage where we put in perhaps headlines in and not doing enough evaluation around them, albeit we do then refer to the report that Simon and Gaynor took as well for the actual detail. So I'll have to go back and absolutely double check for you, but I'm pretty sure that that's the same data that's in the report Simon and Gaynor took. However, it's at the level of what we report to the Ombudsman, not in that breakdown of detail below. So I think I will pick it up offline with her just to double check that for you. And through the chair, I'm happy to go back then if there's any clarification.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great, because obviously reading through this report, then there's quite a bit of confusion if there's different compartmentalized pieces of information and it's not reflective of the service as a whole. So that would be great. Thanks.
I think Councillor Scriven, the posh word of it is triangulation. I just call it joining the dots between different bits of information that come our way, make sure it all makes sense. Any further questions on this report? Okay, the intention, if I can quickly scroll back to the paper itself, the paper says that we are to note and debate the content, and we've done that, and recommend it is progressed to council for approval. I think it's on council agenda coming forward. So are we happy to recommend this goes forward to council? Okay, I'm recognising, of course, it's a movable feast, and continually every iteration will improve the quality of it. So that's terrific. Thank you, everyone. We now move on to agenda item 9, the quarterly update on corporate risks. And for our benefit, we have quarters 1 and 2, or a half yearly rather than quarterly update. Who's going to lead on this?
I think I'll take this one, Chair, unless Councillor Barry wants to. You happy for me to take this one, Councillor Barry?
Yeah, happy for you to take on with.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is relating to quarter 1 and quarter 2 for 23-24. Not my apology and omission for quarter 1, Chair. So I brought this one forward for consideration this afternoon. Met with corporate management team for quarter 1. All risk remained the same there, which was expected moving into budget setting, etc. moving forward. In Q2, you will note on the report that one risk has increased, which is the in-year risk for finance, which is finance 1, and a risk has decreased in relation to the waste management target and a recycling percentage, which was met with CMT on the 8th of November. As you see, the Cabinet on the 20th of November, where this was agreed. There was no additional risks being proposed or seen as emerging. So with that in mind, the other risks then have remained the same. And as you would have noted from Sue Walker and the learning education risks, the ALN number for ALN and home to school transport was deemed to be 2 separate risks, so they've been split going forward. So those are the only changes for Q1 and Q2, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. That's really helpful. I mean, the where are we now section paragraph 5 really draws out some of the sort of key things, doesn't it? It shows that sort of council does not balance its budget and financial stability. I think every council in the country will have that as a 20, if not even higher. Good luck with that, Liam. Just to record, I mean, the sense check of this is just, does it sort of feel like these are the issues which are hopefully not keeping us awake at night, but these are the top concerns we have. And with the exception of the one I raised earlier about school attendance, I think that it absolutely does. I mean, underneath this, as Sue Walker referenced earlier, there are departmental risks, and the process for getting them onto the corporate risk register is there a kind of people bid to get onto the corporate risk register? It's not simply a numbers game, I suspect. It's a bit more complex than that.
No, Chair, nobody would bid to come onto the corporate risk register, but the process being each head of service or SLT will have an operational risk register which they'll keep up to date. I'll meet with them 6 monthly and we'll review the process, review the risks, anything emerging, anything that can be taken off. Within our risk strategy policy document, we have a tolerance there of risk score of 12. So anything that reaches 12 or above, I will then escalate to corporate management team. Yeah. If deemed necessary, then we'll take it further and we'll add it to the corporate risk register, or we'll make note of it. There might be a couple of capacity risks within an operational register, but we just see that as an umbrella within the capacity or within the finance risk. So anything above 12, when I meet with the operational risk register managers, I'll bring to corporate management team to see if it's relevant to be put on the corporate risk in its own regard.
And you have quite an important role there in terms of pulling together risks from individual departments, which might recognise some themes that come out, which actually might work it worthwhile. I would challenge you in terms of no one would want it to be on a corporate risk. Sometimes people have the mind that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. If I complain loud enough about all the pressures and risks here, then perhaps the director of finance will give me some more money. That's I've certainly seen that happen in some places. Sorry, while I'm talking, Councillor Barry, you've been waiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this is more akin to a sort of more live register, and you know, we're getting back to the prominence that it deserves. Obviously, finance one, we've got as with everybody else, we've got major concerns about where the direction of travel for our financial settlements. We're hoping that come the 20th, we can knock that back a bit, but there doesn't seem to be much enthusiasm for that happening at the moment. But it's certainly, I'm an advocate of involving all members in the risk register to see what the perception is across the piece. I think this is more cabinet and CMT at this juncture, but I can see the benefits of broadening that, and it's something we've done before, Matthew, in terms of including, you know, far more members in their perception, and it's something we may well go back to. But certainly, you know, it does reflect with a more immediacy what is happening in the world, and it's something we to keep it to the fore can only be good in terms of a governance pillar for our organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. You're entirely right. The more people engage in this, of course, the answer to the question, who's the risk manager in the organisation, the answer is, of course, everyone. So I think it's the more people you engage in, the better. One last question for me, Matthew, is around sort of the behind this. So for each of these risks, kind of would like to know a little bit more about the what, when, who, how in terms of managing those risks. I presume that all exists, and I fully understand why some of that wouldn't necessarily want to be in the public domain. But if perhaps you could share that in the way that internal audit share internal audit reports, that would be kind of helpful just to have some of that further detail so we can do a little bit more interrogating.
Certainly, Chair, can do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the half-yearly risk update? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the deep dives, and those with a good memory will remember we did item 11 already, so we're on item 10, which is the rolling program corporate risk update on capacity. I'm guessing, Alice, capacity buck stops with you.
No, thanks, Chair. I'll let Matthew take the report and I'll answer any questions then, Oscar.
Thanks, Alice. Yes, we have two capacity risks on a corporate risk register, capacity 1 and obviously capacity 2. Capacity 1 links to the risk of the council loses staff with the skills and capacity to deliver on key outcomes and targets. And capacity 2 is the risk that the council will not recruit and retain staff, leading to single points of dependency. They both scored at a 12 as a 4/3 on our latest version of the risk register. I spoke with the head of HR in regards to figures coming out of the HR system that weren't ready for this afternoon, but what we were looking to provide is the percentage of turnover of staff per area, and also those staff that have left the organisation is a trend information data really in regards to why they've left. So from a healthy organisation strategy that's going to council in December, maybe we could theme up an area or areas within that as to why staff are leaving, and maybe put measures in place then to retain staff. We do have areas within the authority, and this is across Wales, where we're struggling to recruit within adult services, within sort of disciplines of engineering and maybe town planning, and certainly in areas of Welsh language. The Welsh language policy officer, prior to the latest recruit, went out 4 times to advert and we failed. We were lucky this time, it only went out twice, and I managed to recruit into the Welsh language policy officer role. So hopefully they will be commencing and starting in post in the beginning of the new year. But as I said there, in regards to the continued and the current controls to manage the risk and the additional of mitigation in regards to the healthy organisation, the Merthyr manager, what else do we have in there? Applying the redundancy policy in regards to the staff leaving via VR process to ensure that we capture everything that they would need to do so we can take things further forward. But yeah, capacity is an issue for us, and those key areas there are areas of concern, but not just for us, all across Wales. So meeting with the WLGA across the risk managers network, and I believe it's on an agenda where we meet with everyone across Wales, the capacity and obviously finance. And from then I'll take anything that's emerging and bring back the corporate management team, a cabinet for thoughts and consideration. Any questions on capacity, Chair?
Chair, if I just come in on the back of Matthew.
Go ahead.
So obviously we share many of the challenges in terms of trying to recruit specialist disciplines such as engineers, for example. That's a good example where there's a paucity across Wales in terms of local authorities when the private sector command a far higher wage and salary range, and so we're competing against that. So we've got a couple of areas where we struggle, but so does everyone else. Where Merthyr has a specific challenge, I think, is because we are the smallest authority in terms of attracting in sometimes new staff when our surrounding authorities for a job, well, it's called the same job, but actually you won't wear as many hats in another authority as you do in Merthyr. So we have to ask a far greater diversity on a job description than our fellow colleagues in surrounding authorities, and usually for less money because of our size. So that is a challenge that we are very live to in Merthyr. Sorry, Jay, I didn't come in earlier. I went right to the start of the meeting because I thought you were talking about something else. But in terms of capacity, so I'll bring members' attention back to the fact that I tried 3 times to recruit a corporate director of governance and resources, and with no success, unfortunately. And so we've got to think differently. So where we are So back to the, as Matthew said, the healthy organisation strategy, where we're looking very much at our retention and attraction of our staff. How do we grow our own staff into, and look at succession planning, and we try every other every other thing in the book that we can think of to try and plug out capacity gaps or skills shortages, as well as, when we're lucky, we do get some very good staff coming in, but obviously that's not always the case, because sometimes we've still got vacancies we're carrying. So I just referred to a couple of points. So social care is another good example where luckily we've managed to buck the trend compared to other authorities, and that is, I think, a good example of where the internal practice. So social services has been operating something called passion for practice within the service for a while now, and the word is out there that Merthyr, from a social care perspective, is a great place to work because of the supportive nature of the team that's surrounding it, and that actually weighs more sometimes than a salary line. However, we are now starting to see, as other authorities are addressing the problem through hiking what they can pay, whereas that is starting to have an attrition rate on us now. So we've got to continually evolve and respond to the challenge, but we'll do it as best we can. We've discussed from the healthy organisation strategy, how do we take the principles of passion for practice in social care across the organisation into other departments, because it's worked there. We've got a good case study in terms of how it has addressed the attractiveness and retention aspect. So how do we take the very best and distill it and keep doing that and see if we can plug other areas? The whole apprenticeship pipeline. So we've had some very good apprentices coming in. Obviously, we limited pots of money to bring in a pipeline of apprentices, but that has worked. We've retained those. We've tried to find places for those apprentices within the organisation when they complete their apprenticeship. And again, rinse and repeating, where we can invest in areas where we can address that as a pipeline and grow our own staff within the organisation. That is something we want to do. And again, unfortunately, due to our size, the turnover and promotion opportunities doesn't necessarily exist. And that's when we then get a different problem of very good staff who are restricted and going upwards, and they go out, as the only alternative. So Merthyr's got a particular set of challenges, but we have our strengths as well. So it is what it is. We are trying to manage it. We recognise there's risk, and we're trying to mitigate those risks as best we can. And in relation to the head of policy, sorry, Chair, just to answer your question.
Yeah.
So as part, obviously, off the back of the director role, I've been looking at how we restructure the corporate centre service setup, and that's coming nearing completion now, and we'll be looking to go out for the head of policy or a policy lead imminently.
Okay, thank you, Alice. That's really helpful and honest update of where we are. Of course, the geography doesn't help because there are an awful lot of councils very near to us here, and as you said, some of them are bigger than us, and that has an impact. Of course, with a small organisation comes the risk about single points of failure, and indeed, one of the audit report talks about that, doesn't it? In one of the internal audit reports we've had today talks about that. So I guess the we are where we are point is a fair one, but on the other hand, it doesn't. There are risks clearly to delivery of what we're trying to deliver. So I guess the question, Alice, is: are we going to be more? What else can we do in terms of being innovative, and not just because he sat on my left, but regional internal audit service seems to be a successful way of sharing a resource and sharing a team, so there aren't single points of failure. I don't know if that's something, perhaps not necessarily for today, but just to say, is that something you're thinking about more generally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. I think we're looking to any opportunities that are to reduce risk in this area. We are considering, obviously, identifying single points of dependency within the organisation. We've done ad nauseum, really. And, we know where we are. So service heads know their pressure areas and our challenge to try and mitigate those risks. But yes, the period we're going into in terms of the challenge of budget setting, I think discussion in terms of further shared services is inevitable. equally, you know, it doesn't have to be a formal shared service. There is a trading opportunity potentially with other authorities where we cover each other off. So, and that is happening in pockets already, going back to, you know, engineering, architecture, SABS engineers, we offer services out and we buy them back in, you know, so it depends which context it is.
Thank you, Alice. And of course, that's a really helpful context there. Talk about the financial constraints that exist and are likely to go forward. Somebody mentioned 20th December as a throwaway line. I guess we should just say that's the date when Welsh Government's going to publish its budget settlements. So that's going to be a bit of a crunch date for most public services in Wales. And I'm sure I'll read in with interest what happens. There may be more money, but I'm not holding my breath. Okay, any other questions on agenda item 10? No. Oh, sorry, Colin, go ahead.
Chair, I was just going to ask about the graph at page 238, 4.6 is the paragraph. The absence of movement in the capacity risk, obviously thinking about cause and effect and where we are with the financial position, the staff that we've lost, that there wouldn't be some movement in that over the year.
When I met with the corporate management team, the mitigations within the risk, the current controls seem to lend itself that the capacity risk is static at the moment. Any further movement in that in regards to any finance or any further maybe voluntary retirements or anything else, then we may expect that to go up or down from a financial point of view, or maybe reflecting, as Ellis has said, the difficulty in recruiting into some posts. If they become critical, then maybe the capacity risk will increase or decrease depending on the finance point of view and whether we do actually recruit into those roles. But for the moment, when I met with corporate management team and cabinet, the score of 12 seemed to be accepted by both.
Yeah, I think it's probably a hard question, but I was wondering about the sophistication of the statistical analysis around that, you know, whether we could get more useful data than having that flat line on there to identify those things that need dealing with.
I think it's a very good point you raise it. 12, you know, 4x4 matrix could result in a 12 score from a corporate perspective. I think back to what Matthew mentioned in terms of the data, in terms of attrition rate within the organisation, and that against context, departmental level, against SPODs. You know, that I think that more forensic analysis is really what we need to be held up as, okay, well, this is the understanding of that challenge across the organisation. But it's remained as 12 from a corporate risk score perspective rather than the underlying data behind it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Alice. Helpful discussion on this, and this is why these deep dives I think are beneficial, because they help us get under the skin a little bit. So that's really helpful. I think we'll come back to the program when we move on. We've already discussed agenda item 11. So agenda item 12 is the forward work program. Lisa, do you want to talk us through this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So agenda item 14 is the Governance and Audit Committee Forward Work Programme. And so this is a report that we bring to each Governance and Audit Committee meeting. Section 4.1 of the report states that in order to assist the committee in ensuring that due consideration is given to all aspects of core functions, the proposed forward work programme for 23-24 is attached to Appendix A to the report. There's a table at 4.2 of the report showing the proposed agenda items that are scheduled to be presented at the next meeting on the 15th of January, and members will see that we have 7 items listed. The items being the final self-assessment report, a report on external audit recommendations, we have the internal audit progress against the plan, we've also got internal audit recommendations, counter fraud, again, the committee forward work programme, and our internal audit information reports.
Thank you, Lisa. Can I just confirm what item 1 is? Self-assessment report is, because today we've got the council's self-assessment, haven't we? Are we talking about the committee?
if I can come in there.
Sure.
It's not the committee self-assessment. That's actually on the work programme for February.
Oh, right,
We
okay.
do an internal self-assessment. This is the final report of the report you've received today.
Ah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've seen it technically as a draft today, although it'll go to council pretty much and amended from today.
Yeah, I think the legislation requires after council approval, it's got to come back to governance and
That-
audit.
okay, that was really
And then
helpful.
we send to the minister.
So it'll be almost be for information at that point. Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, Chair, but if there's any change, there's some flexibility around that programme.
And when I read this, I thought this is fine, and I can't think of anything else to add. But as we've been talking this morning, a number of things have come up, haven't they? We've got not necessarily for January, but sometime in the future to be scheduled, the implementation of plans in response to the 2 audit Wales reports we've had today. They both need to be scheduled in somewhere, and again, you can discuss when those fit. And I think we will continue with the rolling program of, I keep calling them deep dives. The paper itself just called the rolling program of COVID risk updates. And again, we'll look at what a suitable topic is and timelines for those going forward as well. But I think it's been a really helpful discussions we've had today. Anything for anyone else in terms of any gaps, omissions, things they'd like to see on the forward plan? Okay, we noted subject to those suggested amends, which might not necessarily be for January, but to fit in as appropriate. The last substantive piece of business on the agenda today then is agenda item 13, which is the review of the internal audit reports that have been issued since our last meeting, which admittedly was only a month ago. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to inform members of the committee of the issued finalised internal audit reports. So these are information reports and they've been issued between the period the 14th of October to the 24th of November. Copies of these reports have already been provided to members. Table 1 and 3.1 of the report illustrates that we've issued 2 finalised internal audit reports during the timescales given. Both of these reports relate to the current year's audit plan. The table also shows for each of the reports the audit opinion that we've given, the number of recommendations that have been made and whether they're a high, medium or low priority. Members will note that for one audit review, we've given this a substantial assurance opinion and the other has been given a limited assurance audit opinion. So the limited assurance opinion was in respect of the Blessed Carlo Acutis School, and members will note at an earlier meeting on the 23rd of October, we reported progress against the internal audit plan. Now, at this time, this report was a draft piece of work, but we provided a heads up to members of the committee of the audit opinion. Basically, we undertook a routine audit in accordance with the internal audit plan. I think it's key to note that this school was formed following amalgamation of 3 former primary schools and 1 secondary school to form the new all-through Catholic school in the county borough. The school is currently still split over the 4 sites, but it has 1 governing body. So I think it's key to mention really that there was an issue around timings, whether it was a good time to go in and undertake the audit because the school is still in a transitional period with some processes strategic across the entire site. Other processes are undertaken at each site. So it was almost like doing 4 audits in one. So I think that's contributed to the number of overall findings as well. But our opinion of limited was basically given on the basis that the number of high priority findings. So we had 3 of the 4 findings within safeguarding as a high priority, and we had 5 of the 15 within school private fund as of a high priority. This report obviously has now been finalised, which is why it's here for information today. All of the recommendations have been agreed. We've had feedback that some have been implemented. The majority have a target date of the 31st of December. There's 1 for later on in the end of March. So our normal process then would be any audit that we undertake with a limited assurance or a no assurance opinion during 1 year would be included in our plan for the following year. So this is an audit that we would revisit in 25 just to undertake a routine follow-up. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Really helpful, and it was helpful to get the heads up on the Blessed Carlo Acutis School audit last time. So it's helpful to understand the context of where that is, because on the bald face of it, it looks kind of sort of a little scary, but it's really good that we engaged that at a really early place, almost as an advisory audit, to tell them what they need to do to get all their ducks properly aligned. And I'm pleased to hear that they are moving on that. We'll hear about the follow-up, of course, in due course in the next 12 months, and it'll be helpful to understand that as well. And again, helpful to understand that actions are being implemented. On the other audit, the information security, it's a substantial assurance, which members remember that's the highest level of assurance you can get. There is one reference in there, though, to a single point of failure. So echoing back to something Chief Exec mentioned earlier, that still, it resonates across all of the areas of work here. The paper asks if we wish to consider any of these reports in more detail at a future meeting and receive updates from appropriate officers. Personally, I think we wait and see what the follow-up report says from the school with next year. I think there's little point in calling anybody and specifically talking about it because they know what they need to do, and it sounds like they're doing it. So if the follow-up tells us that things haven't happened, then perhaps we look at it at that point. But I'm happy to listen to any dissenting views. And I don't see any, which is excellent. Okay, so we are here to note. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Scriven.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to wait for the follow-up, but of course, I think reading the report specifically, and I understand that as was said just now, it's like taking 4 audits at once and with the school amalgamation. But I think some of the stuff that's been identified is common practice that's been very badly dealt with. Obviously, you can't go into detail about it in here, but very concerning things around safeguarding, especially the practice around the finance of the school. So I am happy to wait, but I do think it would be really significant that we keep an eye on this one, and if need be, if any concerns arise in the meantime, that we call it in as well.
Thank you. That's entirely fair comment. So I guess, Lisa, would say if the follow-up could happen as soon as possible, noting, of course, you have to give them time to action near them. So early in 24-25, I guess, is our recommendation here. Lisa.
I'd also like to add, perhaps on that one, is that in our January meeting, we bring in a report on internal audit recommendations. So as this school has a number of recommendations falling due at the end of December, hopefully we'll have some feedback then for committee in January. So that'll be a gauge of where we are with the target dates and the implementation of those. So that'll be an indicator for members ahead of any follow-up that we do later on then, once all of the recommendations have been fully implemented.
Okay, that sounds like a sensible proposal. You content, Councillor Scriven?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Chair, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we have noted, and I don't think there's any calling at this stage. So we'll simply note item 13. Item 14 is just a reflection on today's meeting, which I think has been really helpful. We had the right people in the room. I think the one thing to learn is when we do the deep dive call in risk updates, the service lead person here really helps. Having Sue Walker here today made for a better conversation than would always be the case. Otherwise, Matthew's trying to bat for everybody, and that's not fair. We need to sort of, we need to have the individuals concerned in the room, which is really helpful if we can do that. So we'll make sure we schedule those in when that happens. Any other reflections on today? Okay, there's any other business either. And Lisa, you mentioned the date of the next meeting. I have already forgotten it. Sometime in January. The 15th of January, I'm told. Yes, it's on the table. Yes, yeah. So 15th of January, we're back here again. So as everyone gets sick of hearing for the next few weeks, that's the last meeting for Christmas. So it's incumbent upon me to wish everyone a happy Christmas. Unfortunately, no mince pies today, though. Budget cuts and all that. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.